What does the crisis in Congo have to do with music in Zimbabwe? Well, let me explain. Remember when the chaos erupted in the DRC? There was that other thing that happened.
Streaming into the little town of Kitwe in northern Rhodesia, just across the border from the Congo, come the refugees, with whatever they could bring, and often bearing marks of the trouble they had getting away. Further north, at the frontier post of Kasumbalesa, families arrive by car and on foot, and even the children are armed. For in the tragedy that has struck the heart of Africa, these people were taking no chances. Rhodesian police take charge of the refugees' weapons for safekeeping until their possible return to the Congo. But some of them aren't too hopeful, remembering the sight of their burnt-out shops in Elizabethville.
See, most those European refugees from Congo would head to Australia and New Zealand, just like most Europeans running away from Africa usually do. But not before a short stop in Rhodesia. All these refugees would end up in Rhodesia and recount all the events that had just happened to them. This would fuel the Rhodesian Front, a right-wing party which was led by Ian Smith. Ian Smith would use this to great effect, to push for white minority rule. Ian Smith would form the Rhodesian Front and establish a white minority rule, creating a society that was based on the principles of white supremacy.
They are totally opposed to the concept of multiracialism because it assumes in the first instance that the people have got to be arranged in compartments based on color. You have Europeans in one compartment, Asians and coloreds in two other compartments, and the Africans in another compartment. And immediately you talk of multiracialism, you are accepting as a starting point that the races are different, and this difference must be recognized. We are non-racialist in our approach. That is, we regard as an individual as an individual, and that everybody must be accorded his full political rights, whether he be white or black, educated or uneducated, rich or poor. And this is exactly why we are at the moment struggling to earn for our people one man, one vote.
Rhodesia's races are still separated, not only by jobs, income and social standing, but also by the law. But Rhodesia's Land Apportionment Act still keeps the races living apart. State schools are strictly segregated. There's also rigid segregation in hospitals. Whites have the Andrew Fleming in Salisbury, while blacks have theirs in the Harare township.
There are two key factors to gather from this historical lesson. The first, with the rise of Smith and the Rhodesian Front to power and their continued oppression and denial of rights to all black Zimbabweans, would lead directly to the Zimbabwe's War of Liberation.
In this war, the killing is done at such close range that a soldier actually sees the expression on his victim's face as he dies. A man has died. Another man dies, this time an innocent civilian. But in this war, the man who shoots first survives.
One of the latest atrocities in the guerrilla war.
The long-term effect on these young men of the continued killing is not yet to be seen. Possible psychological effects are far more worrying.
And from the War of Liberation, the birth of Chimerenga music. Chimerenga music and liberation songs, Oingoma, Zenkululeka, would remain popular after independence as the country enjoyed the euphoria of independence. One thing that is understated is just how much the Rhodesian Front's time in power and the War of Independence affected Zimbabwean artists. Curfews meant that bands could not have evening events, while segregation meant that bands could not perform across racial borders. This was particularly bad for black jazz bands who could not perform at high-end clubs and bars because of segregation. Secondly, and most importantly, is the concept of national consciousness. Macmillan constantly refers to it in his speech.
National consciousness is a political fact.
One aspect of consciousness is the political movement, but also national consciousness could be seen in other aspects of creativity and arts and culture. National consciousness could be seen in dress, as Macmillan seen here wearing leopard skin. In music, for instance, Maskanda music went from being this to this. National consciousness could be seen in Zimbabwean music too. For instance, the rise in popularity of artists using the mbira instrument could be said to be a vital evidence of national consciousness. Thomas Mafumu, a popular Zimbabwean artist, came to popularity around this time, whilst the artists we mentioned earlier, Lamo Majaivana and Oliver Mtukudzi, both performed African folk songs in their routine in their earlier days. This was all part of national consciousness movement. To understand why there was such a strong rise in national consciousness, one must understand the construction of the nation of Southern Rhodesia. Let's use these quotes as a reference point. These quotes perfectly sum up why there was such a strong rise in national consciousness. For over 100 years of colonialism, there had been an attempt to destroy and wipe out the numerous cultural backgrounds, heritages, under the colonial umbrella. That is the whole point of colonialism, wiping out other cultures and establishing your own. During that period, a lot of cultural identity and customs were lost. National consciousness gathered momentum throughout Africa as people started to appreciate their own cultural history and long for a sound that would reflect this.